Thanks for tuning in to your daily dose of quick real estate updates, local housing trends, and market data, plus tips, tools, and strategies to help you buy, rent, or invest with confidence. You're now getting ready with RealiCare Reports, powered by the innovation team, Cami and Rex. Now go grab your favorite morning breakfast, coffee or tea, and let's enjoy today's episode.
Imagine a sovereign nation with like a massive $1.8 trillion economy.
Oh, yeah. That is massive.
Right. And it just officially outpaced Australia and Mexico in sheer economic output.
Wow.
And it is aggressively gunning for Canada next. Now, imagine that this economic juggernaut doesn't actually have a president. It doesn't have a military, and it doesn't even print its own currency.
Because it's not a nation at all.
Exactly. It is the U.S. state of Florida.
Which is, it completely disrupts that traditional mental map we have of global economics.
Yeah, it really does.
When a localized state economy starts swinging at the weight class of the G7, the ripple effects go far, far beyond its own borders.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. Welcome in, by the way. We know you want to get perfectly up to speed on these major complex topics without all the info overload.
Right. Cut through the noise.
Exactly. So today we are looking at a brand new report just released in July 2026. It's jointly from Florida Realtors and the Florida Chamber Foundation.
Yeah.
And the big headline dropping out of this report is that $1.8 trillion milestone. But to really grasp the gravity of this, we kind of have to look past the surface level.
Which is a crucial distinction. Because, when you hear the source name Florida Realtors, it's incredibly easy to assume we're about to spend the next 15 minutes talking about, local housing inventory or mortgage rates.
Like beachfront property values, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely not what this is. We are using this specific source material to synthesize how a single state's blueprint for growth has fundamentally altered its global standing.
Yeah.
We're talking about deep macroeconomics, the mechanics of structural demographic shifts, and really the literal engine of a trillion-dollar expansion.
Okay, let's unpack this, because going from a region primarily known for, tourism and retirement communities to a $1.8 trillion global powerhouse, that requires a massive structural transition.
It does. It's a total overhaul.
So let's ground that raw number in reality for a second. According to this new report, Florida's economy is now officially the 14th largest in the entire world.
Right. They were sitting at number 15.
Yep, and they just claimed that 14th spot.
And looking at who they displaced gives you a real sense of the velocity here. Moving past the entire national economies of Australia and Mexico, that is not some marginal statistical error.
No, not at all.
It requires a fundamental difference in daily economic output.
Right. And I want to visualize this away from just standard data points for you listening. Think of this like watching a massive corporate restructuring.
Oh, I like that.
It's like a legacy company that survived for decades selling just one flagship product, in this case tourism, suddenly pulling off this masterclass pivot.
Yeah, to become a highly diversified tech and manufacturing conglomerate.
Exactly. The profit margins completely change, the volume changes, and suddenly they are acquiring market share from legacy giants who have entirely different resource pools.
That corporate restructuring analogy is actually highly accurate, especially because of the mechanisms involved. The report notes that to hit this 14th spot, the state experienced a massive 6.3% economic growth rate over the past year.
Now, wait a minute. I have to challenge the reality of that momentum.
Okay, go for it.
Look, 6.3% growth in a mature, developed market usually means something highly anomalous is happening.
Sure, yeah.
Right. Usually when we see a spike like that in a specific region, it means someone is cooking the books, or, I don't know, maybe it's a temporary boom from federal disaster relief after a major hurricane.
A massive injection of temporary cash, yeah.
Exactly. So, looking at the mechanics in the source, how do we know this isn't just a post-storm construction bubble inflating the numbers for a few quarters?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the Florida Chamber Foundation breaks down the anatomy of that 6.3% growth. They categorically do not view this as a temporary blip or a disaster recovery spike. They frame it as the compounding result of a very deliberate long-term track record.
So it's intentional.
Very intentional. To understand why this isn't an anomaly, We have to look at the baseline math.
Right.
When you are dealing with an economy that is already hovering near $2 trillion, you cannot move the needle by 6.3% with just a few temporary construction contracts.
That makes sense. The denominator is just too big.
Exactly. The sheer volume of daily transactions, logistics, port activity, and advanced service rendering required to generate that percentage, it means the growth is deeply structural. You are creating permanent new capacities, not just temporarily inflating old ones.
So they haven't just caught a lucky gust of wind. They have fundamentally redesigned the sails and the hull of the boat.
That's a great way to put it.
Which naturally brings up the question of where they are actually trying to navigate to, because 14th in the world is their current reality. But the report makes it very clear that this is nowhere near the finish line.
Oh, far from it. The data we are looking at is tied to a specific framework they call the Florida 2030 Blueprint.
Right. The blueprint.
And this blueprint isn't just, a vague collection of aspirations. It has a very public, highly specific objective, which is becoming one of the world's top 10 economies by the year 2030.
Which feels completely audacious when you consider the sovereign heavyweights occupying those top 10 spots.
But it really does.
I mean, to crack the top 10, they have to systematically dismantle the leads of the economies right in front of them.
Right.
So the immediate next hurdle identified in the report is South Korea. They're currently sitting at number 13.
Yep.
And to overtake South Korea, Florida basically needs to generate about 2% more growth.
Which is doable.
Yeah. But the ultimate boss at the end of this current blueprint is Canada. Canada holds that coveted number 10 spot. And to surpass Canada, Florida requires a much steeper 21% additional growth.
And this is where it gets crazy, because we have to ground that 21% target in the actual timeline.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So as we analyze this report, it is August 2026. The deadline for the blueprint is 2030.
Wow.
Yeah, they have slightly less than 4 years to close a 21% gap against a G7 nation.
Wait, that completely changes the math. Getting 21% growth over 20 years is like standard organic expansion.
Right.
But doing it in under 4 years, what does that physically require from an economy?
It requires an incredibly aggressive compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, that completely outpaces normal, mature Western economies.
So what does that look like on the ground?
In mechanics terms, this means you can't just rely on your existing businesses increasing their sales by a few percent a year. You need massive, continuous capital influx.
Right.
You need entirely new industries to physically break ground, build facilities, hire thousands of people, and start exporting products simultaneously.
It means the economic engine has to fire on cylinders that most people don't even realize the state possesses.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what we need to look at next, because you can't catch Canada on theme park tickets and orange juice.
No, you really can't.
I mean, no disrespect to the legacy industries, but they don't close a 21% gap in 4 years. So what is actually generating this unprecedented volume of capital?
Well, the source data gives us a look under the hood, and it comes down to a series of national rankings, where Florida has recently taken the #1 spot.
The rankings are incredibly revealing because they highlight the exact mechanisms of the growth.
Yeah, they do.
Right, and reading through these, I mean, they completely rewrite the traditional narrative.
For sure.
Listen to what they are actually ranking #1 in nationally right now. New business startups.
Huge.
The higher education system. Manufacturing job growth. Net income migration. And new business migration.
Yeah, it's wild.
Plus, looking at the diversity metrics of this business leadership, they are #1 for Black-owned businesses and #2 for Hispanic and women-owned businesses.
It's a complete departure from the historical economic profile of the state.
It really is. But I want to drill down into the causality here, because listing rankings is one thing, but understanding how they interact is another.
Right.
For instance, when most people think of Florida, they think of beaches, theme parks, retirement. Being #1 in manufacturing job growth and higher education completely flips the traditional script on its head.
It does.
So how are these specific metrics, like education and manufacturing, acting as the catalyst for the massive new business migration they are seeing?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see the exact feedback loop in action.
Okay.
It all starts with the mechanics of talent clustering.
Talent clustering.
Yeah. A top-ranked higher education system isn't just a metric of graduation rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
It represents the creation of localized research and development pipelines.
Ah, I see.
When a state pumps resources into university research parks, specifically in things like engineering, biotech, and aerospace. They are building a highly specialized talent pool.
So an advanced manufacturing company looking to build a new billion-dollar facility isn't just looking for cheap land.
No, not at all.
They are looking for a guarantee that they can staff that facility with top-tier engineers for the next 30 years?
Precisely. And when those advanced manufacturing firms relocate to tap into that university talent, they bring their entire supply chains with them.
Oh, of course.
The factory needs specialized parts vendors. The vendors need local logistics software. The software developers need data centers.
It cascades.
Exactly. This clustering effect feeds directly into the #1 ranking for new business startups. You have university researchers spinning off their own tech companies, and you have secondary businesses forming just to service the massive new manufacturing plants.
Okay, so the university creates the engineer gets hired by the manufacturing firm, the firm brings in global capital, and then that same engineer eventually leaves to launch their own startup right down the street.
That's the cycle.
It's an incredibly sticky ecosystem. Which brings us to the net income migration metric. We hear a lot about people moving across the country, but net income migration is a very specific mechanic, isn't it?
It is, and honestly, it is arguably the most powerful multiplier in this entire report.
Really?
Yeah, because net income migration doesn't just measure the raw number of bodies crossing the state line. It measures the actual wealth those individuals are bringing with them.
Right, because if someone sells a highly successful tech firm in another state, moves to Florida, buys a home, and then uses their capital to start an angel investing fund that seeds 5 local businesses, that one individual's migration just created an entire localized microeconomy.
Exactly. They don't have to wait 20 years to build a tax base. The established wealth just arrives overnight.
That's incredible.
It is. The influx of established capital instantly stimulates the local service and retail economies. But to sustain that, you need resilience, which is why those diversity metrics are so critical.
Leading the nation in Black, Hispanic, and women-owned businesses.
Right. Because from a purely macroeconomic perspective, diversity in business ownership is a massive indicator of systemic resilience.
How so?
Well, if an economy is dominated by a single demographic or a single legacy industry, it is highly vulnerable to localized market shocks.
That's a bad hurricane season wiping out tourism.
Exactly. But a diverse business leadership base means a wider variety of ideas, access to different national and international markets, and a much more dynamic environment.
It signals to outside capital that the ecosystem is broadly accessible.
Right, which acts as a further magnet for that new business migration.
It's basically a self-reinforcing magnet. But look, here's the reality check.
Okay.
High-level corporate growth, startup metrics, massive inward migration. That all sounds phenomenal on paper.
Sure.
But if you are looking at this like a real-world balance sheet, rapid expansion is incredibly expensive.
It is very expensive.
Usually when a region expands its infrastructure, its schools, and its roads to accommodate this kind of boom, they have to borrow heavily to subsidize it. If the state is drowning in debt to pay for the growth, the foundation is completely hollow.
And that is exactly where the fiscal health data in this source material provides a vital stress test for the entire 2030 blueprint.
Because according to the report, despite absorbing this massive migration and achieving 6.3% growth, Florida currently has the lowest state debt per capita in the entire country.
It's pretty wild when you think about it.
It really is. Let me put that in the context of a personal household budget for you listening, because state finance can feel very, very abstract.
Good idea.
It is essentially like looking at a family in your neighborhood who is simultaneously increasing their income faster than anyone else on the block, right? They are building additions onto their house. They are launching 3 new side businesses, and yet they somehow maintain the lowest credit card and mortgage debt in the entire neighborhood.
It is an incredibly rare combination in public finance. Typically, the lever you pull for rapid infrastructure expansion is massive municipal bonding and debt issuance.
Right.
But by keeping per capita debt at the absolute floor while expanding, they drastically lower the future tax risk for incoming businesses.
Wait, break that down for us. Explain that mechanic. Why does low state debt act as a magnet for corporate relocation?
Well, think about it from the top down. If you are a CEO planning a 10-year capital expenditure, say building a new corporate headquarters, you have to forecast your tax burden.
Okay.
If you move to a state with massive ballooning debt, you know mathematically that the state will eventually have to raise corporate taxes to service that debt.
It's basically an unavoidable future liability.
Exactly. But if a state has the lowest per capita debt in the nation, that future tax risk is incredibly low. It provides corporate boards with a highly predictable, stable environment to deploy billions of dollars of capital.
So the low debt isn't just a nice accounting stat, it's an active recruiting tool.
Yes.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because trillion-dollar GDP numbers, supply chain mechanics, and per capita debt ratios can feel very cold and institutional.
Very detached from daily life, yeah.
Exactly. But the ultimate test of an economy is what it does to the people living inside it. The report highlights a staggering human element here. There are 155,742 fewer children living in poverty since the launch of this Florida 2030 blueprint.
Yeah, that specific metric is the bridge. It connects macro corporate success directly to micro community impact.
Exactly. And I want to bring in a direct quote from the source material here.
Let's hear it.
Mark Wilson, the president and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, attributes this overarching success to a very specific philosophy. He states that this rise is, quote, further proof that free enterprise works. He expands on that, saying that the state continues creating jobs, attracting investment, and giving families greater opportunity to succeed.
Right. And regarding Wilson's assertion there, it's really important we frame this contextually for you listening.
Absolutely.
We need to explicitly state that we are not taking a political stance here or universally endorsing the concept that pure free enterprise is always the answer.
Right. Economists debate that constantly.
They do. Various schools of economic thought advocate for different balances of state intervention versus free market mechanics. But for our purposes in analyzing this report, we are impartially reporting how the Florida Chamber of Commerce leadership attributes their success.
Right. They view their specific policy environment as a free enterprise model, and they are explicitly linking that model to these outcomes.
Exactly. That is their operational thesis. And we can synthesize that thesis further by looking at another key quote from the report, this one from Sheridan Morby, the Foundation's Senior Director of Economic Research.
What does Morby say?
Morby says, strong labor market expansion and business investment continue to help position Florida among the world's largest economies.
Okay.
When we unpack Morby's point about labor market expansion, we can see the exact physical mechanism that ties the trillion-dollar engine directly to that reduction in child poverty.
Walk us through that mechanism. How does corporate business investment pull over 150,000 kids out of poverty?
It comes down to wage competition across all skill tiers. When Morby talks about labor market expansion driven by a booming manufacturing sector and a surge in new businesses, we aren't just talking about six-figure engineering jobs.
Right. The factories need more than just engineers.
Exactly. When a billion-dollar manufacturing plant opens, it requires a massive supporting workforce. It needs logistics coordinators, maintenance technicians, administrative staff, and localized service workers.
And because there are suddenly hundreds of new businesses competing for the same localized labor pool, they essentially have to raise wages to attract workers.
Exactly. The competition for labor organically drives up wages at the entry and middle management levels.
That makes total sense.
And furthermore, when that established wealth we talked about earlier flows into the state via net income migration, it creates an explosion in the localized service and retail sectors.
Ah.
That strong, diverse labor market expansion is the primary mechanism that elevates household incomes. It's not just abstract wealth creation happening in corporate boardrooms.
It is widespread job creation that provides a tangible upward mobility ladder for families who were previously hovering below the poverty line.
Yes. The rising tide is actually creating entirely new currents.
So what does this all mean for you right now? Let's do a rapid-fire synthesis of everything we've uncovered in this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We are looking at a state economy operating as the 14th largest country in the world, having just lapped Australia and Mexico.
Yep.
They are actively utilizing a massive talent pipeline from their higher education system to fuel advanced manufacturing and unprecedented business migration. And they are doing all of this while somehow maintaining the lowest state debt per capita in the nation, drastically reducing child poverty, and setting a calculated, aggressive course to overthrow Canada for the number 10 spot globally by the year 2030.
It is a formidable, highly engineered trajectory. But
Yeah.
as with any massive economic shift, this story is highly dynamic.
Right. It's not over.
No, the source material points out that the Chamber Foundation's 2026 Florida Business and Economic Midyear Report is actually scheduled for release next month, in September 2026.
And based on everything we've just unpacked today, what specific pressure points should we expect them to be looking at in that upcoming data?
Well, that September report is going to have to dive deep into the potential friction points of this exact growth model.
Like what?
When you have this much net income migration and business relocation happening this rapidly, it places an immense strain on infrastructure.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, so they will be examining localized inflation, the ongoing challenges of workforce development, ensuring the education system can actually keep up with the manufacturing demand.
That's a big one.
And crucially, housing affordability. Because if the workforce that is supposed to fill these new labor market expansions can no longer afford to live near the facilities, that becomes a massive headwind.
Right, they get priced out.
Exactly. That is the variable that could potentially cause this trillion-dollar engine to overheat.
Which means we will definitely be keeping our eyes peeled for that September data drop to see if the blueprint needs adjusting.
Absolutely. And, as we conclude our analysis of this July report, this raises an important question for you to ponder long after this audio stops.
Let's hear it.
We are currently watching an individual U.S. state increasingly operate with the economic footprint, the industrial complexity, and the diverse demographic resilience of a G7 nation.
Yeah.
So if that trend accelerates and states begin functioning more like sovereign economic powerhouses, how might that fundamentally shift the way residents and businesses view the importance of state-level policies versus federal policies in their everyday lives?
That's a huge shift in perspective.
Right. I mean, if your local state economy is significantly larger, more dynamic, and more solvent than major nations like Mexico or Australia, does your state capital suddenly become the primary driver of your daily prosperity rather than the nation's capital?
Man, that is a phenomenal thought to end on, because it really does reframe the entire map of how we understand power and prosperity.
It does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We set out to give you the signal through the noise, and hopefully you now have a crystal clear picture of the mechanics behind how one regional economy is suddenly setting the pace for the entire globe. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Well, that wraps up today's episode of RealiCare Reports, where real estate meets real life. For more updates, tools, and insights that will help you buy, rent, or invest with confidence, be sure to follow, subscribe, stay connected, stay informed, and stay ready. Until next time.